Right. Good morning, Mr. Sandison.
Good morning. Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Yes.
Good. So, as you know, we're here to talk about kind of Cobham, how things have changed for our linguistic unit of work. And I'd like to start off by asking you, how long have you been a resident of Cobham, please?
Right, so I've lived in Cobham, Reed School, for 31 years now. And it's changed a lot. I've seen quite a few changes.
And was there something in particular that originally drew you to the area of Cobham?
Oh my goodness. No, it was just pure coincidence. It was just down to where there was... I was already working at Sevenoaks School, so I suppose I wanted somewhere that wasn't too far away from Sevenoaks, because by that time I was married, so I had to think about living. I couldn't go back to Scotland, for example. There's no way my wife would have wanted to go back all the way up to Scotland. So I was committed to staying in the southeast, and in fact I have done a trajectory over my my working life from starting out in Reigate, then Sevenoaks, and then Cobham. So you could say that the M25 was the reason for going to Cobham.
So is it safe to say that you kind of knew about Cobham before you moved here?
No idea.
Okay.
No, I mean, obviously coming from Scotland, I didn't have a clue. And even when I lived in Sevenoaks in Kent, I didn't really know much about Cobham. It was just the job came up. It was a head of department job, and that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a promotion, and it was just pure chance. But everybody, I do remember people at my school at Sevenoaks saying, "Oh, it's a lovely place, really nice place, you'll love it." And my colleagues saying, "Oh, I go for rides in the woods there, and I grew up there." I had a lot of people speaking very positively about Cobham.
Good.
Even though I've not been here. Yeah.
Okay. So when you first got to Cobham 31 years ago, what were your kind of first impressions of the area of Cobham where Reeds was kind of located, but more focusing around the town centre of Cobham?
Well, it was an attractive place. And it still is. I think actually it's improved a bit over the years. I would say it's a little bit more vibrant as a town centre than when I first arrived. But it was obviously an affluent looking area. And your first impressions were very much of green open spaces, and that could, in my books, that was a big plus, particularly with young family, having young children growing up. It seemed to be a good environment to bring up a family. The only thing I probably missed was maybe having a little bit more of a connection with London and urban life. I was aware that it's slightly cut off, perhaps, from some of the main facilities you get in a larger town.
Okay.
And because living at Reed School, you are a little bit kind of remote from a lot of key facilities. You rely very much on the car. But as I say, at that time, because I had a young family, I felt that this was a really good environment for them as a young family growing up. Yeah.
So you mentioned it was quite an affluent area when you kind of first moved here.
Yeah.
What gave you the impression? Was it obvious that it was affluent?
Yes. I mean, obviously, there were some areas of council housing as you come into Cobham from Esher. I always remember I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Richmond and then Sandison, and I always remember my aunt who grew up in Richmond saying she obviously came from Esher down into Cobham. I always remember her comments were, "Oh, Cobham looks a bit rough, actually," which I thought was a bit extreme, because that wasn't my impression, particularly coming from a town in Scotland which was a lot more deprived. So, in comparing it with where I grew up, for me, it seemed like very affluent. Although, the outskirts of the town, I think the town has tidied itself up over the years, because I think there were some sort of maybe less affluent parts on the edge of town as you're coming from Esher. But I think on the whole, it's just gradually moved up. Of course, house prices have moved up. I know that years ago you could buy a house quite cheaply in Cobham. and it's now very expensive. And as it's got more expensive to live in, I suppose the quality of the housing stock has improved, but got more expensive. Yeah.
Do you think the style of housing has changed significantly from how it looked?
Not a great deal. No, I mean, I do feel that there's not enough housing for small housing for young people and families. So that's a criticism I would definitely level at Cobham, is that it's geared very much to people with big houses, and there are not. And I haven't seen over the years. I haven't seen very much effort going into building small houses.
Okay.
For starter homes and things. They really seem to have blocked those sort of developments in the town. I think that's one of the disadvantages of the town, that it lacks the young families and people starting out. It seems to be geared a lot more towards the older generations and people with property. So, yeah.
Do you think Chelsea Football Club moving to Cobham in 2004 had an impact on that?
Yes. I think definitely.
Was there a notable change when they moved?
I would say that's when it really started to change, because, as I said before then, I'm not quite sure what the date would be, but we're probably talking about the late 90s. Around that time, I can't remember exactly when Chelsea really...
I believe it was 2004 was when they moved their training ground.
Yes. And I would say that before then... I mean, the biggest difference I note in the town centre is that the river end of the high street was, I would say, a little bit down at heel, and definitely not very attractive. There weren't many desirable shops that you would go to. There were some small little shops. I remember there was a little fruit and veg store. There was a not very good Chinese takeaway. There wasn't a lot to take you down to that end of the high street. So most of the activity in the 90s was at the upper end, the Waitrose end. That's where most people would be. So, and you would notice, it was very, very noticeable, the lack of footfall at the river end of the high street. It was a bit dead, you know. And that's the biggest change that I've seen, is that I don't know whether it's north, south, west, but I call it the river end of the high street that's been regenerated, I think, largely by there's the Sainsbury's there, the cafes that are there now, including a new Cafe Nero, which I'm pleased about. What's the other one that moved in? Boots. And so, and I think that there was the council up until about 2000 or 2004 perhaps really blocked any chain stores coming into the town. I mean, there used to be big discussions in the newspapers about bringing in any chain stores at all, because they were actually a dead set against any chain stores at that time, because they wanted to keep the village. You know, they wanted to keep the village atmosphere of Cobham. They didn't want to spoil it. So I think the coming in of the Chelsea footballs definitely was noticeable, because you could see a lot more sort of flashy cars and footballers going into the cafes, and I think that generated an interest from cafes to come in, Starbucks and Costa Coffee, and that sort of all happened, I would say, roughly around the same time that it started to take off a bit. So and then of course house prices would have gone up as well with the Chelsea Football Club, but there were definitely around 2000 noticeable changes.
So why do you think there was so much objection to chain stores coming in, and what led to the change of chain stores coming in?
I don't know. I think expectations have probably changed. I think in back then, I think it was it was probably on their part trying to weigh up how do we keep the character of the town as it was, and how do we marry that up with creating more attracting more visitors to the high street, because as I said, it was very noticeable. The high street at that end was pretty dead, you know.
So it's interesting you mentioned the word character.
Yeah.
How would you say the character of Cobham has perhaps changed over time? Has it been positive or negative, do you think?
Well, I do feel it's better. I think now going into Cobham is a more interesting experience and more pleasurable. Apart from the parking is a big problem. But I actually welcome the idea of keeping the character of the town. But I can see that bringing in some chain stores, such as the coffee shops and Sainsbury's and Boots, I can see that has improved the high street, and particularly that end. Is it north south? I don't know.
I'm not quite sure.
But I approve of it. But I do feel it's a bit of a tipping point now, because I do feel that it could so easily go the other way and we end up having a clone town. I think that's the expression that's used, isn't it?
Very
clone
good.
town. So I think we're in danger of tipping over into clone town. So I think we've got to be very careful. The Cobham has got to be very careful that it doesn't go down this road of chain stores too much.
Can you remember whether there are any particular shops, cafes? You mentioned the kind of like the fruit and veg store.
Yeah.
But are there particular shops that kind of lost out to bigger chain stores because they just couldn't keep up with?
Oh well, probably
rates?
the best example of that is Oakdean Parade.
Oakdean Parade,
which is where Waitrose is.
Yeah.
And now I'm not sure about the landlord of Oakdean Parade, but I do know that parade, the rents were exorbitantly high, and there were lots of little businesses there that definitely failed and closed. I mean, you look at what's gone into Oakdean Parade now, it's very much more the high-end shops. But yeah, I mean, there was, now, interesting enough, one of the sort of main shop owners in the town is Farrant's. You've got Farrant's, the newsagents. And I do remember that Farrant's had at least three shops, maybe four. Actually, I think they had four. They had four shops in Cobham, because they had, across the road from where Farrant's currently is, they had a sort of stationery and computer software shop. They also owned a toy shop on Oakdean Parade near Waitrose. And they had newsagents as well on Portsmouth Road. So, but I know now that they've whatever the word is, gone downsized. So they've got the one main shop now on the high street. So they obviously felt the pressure from rents. There used to be a uniform shop, and there was also one or two little sort of, I think there was a little food shop there as well, a camera shop. There were a number of little shops that were very much Cobham, independent Cobham shops, and they've all gone now. And I think Oakdean Parade was particularly a victim of high rents. So when you see what's there now, it is very much more high end. I mean, the Waitrose end is particularly high end. And so is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know how many times I would go into, what was it, Jojo Mama's shop, but they've got some nice. I mean, I like the Juice Smith, which has got a nice little. And I know they're a very small chain now, because I think there are 2 or 3 Juice Smiths around. But that's a nice example of a local independent shop, cafe that is doing well. And of course, the big success story probably of Cobham is the doner kebab van. I don't know if you know this, but there's always been a doner kebab van on the high street. Yeah, and I think your dad is a big fan of it as well. Yeah,
I'm sure it is.
But that was always a feature of Cobham High Street, the doner kebab van, and it's only there in the evenings. But they had a roaring trade, because again, there's very, very little in the way of takeaway places in Cobham. Until now, of course, we've got more, but again, 20 or 25 years ago, there was nothing really. Well, there was a fish and chip shop, and there was a little Chinese takeaway. It wasn't very good, and that shut down. So, but it wasn't a great choice. So it was very, very poor. People, I think, used to come from quite far and wide to go to the Doner Kebab van. But a sign of their success is that they actually, whoever the Doner Kebab man was, he has opened his own Doner Kebab grill shop, permanent. It's on Oakdean Parade as well.
Okay.
So that's quite a nice little success story, because that was obviously somebody who started out small and has done well and opened a new, quite successful business.
Good. Yeah. So I don't know. You might be aware that kind of Cobham used to be known as kind of the gin belt, famous kind of sort of Jags and gin. Yeah. And it's now been coined kind of the Beverly Hills of Britain, which you may or may not be aware of.
Yeah.
Is that something you may kind of agree with, or to what extent you might agree with that comment?
Yeah, I mean, you can see that the sort of people that are... I mean, Cobham is a funny mix, like a lot of Surrey. I mean, you get obviously very wealthy people, but you still got a lot of ordinary people as well that shop there and go there. But I do think it attracts more money to people than it used to, perhaps.
So has that led to a bit of a split between kind of the new people coming in and the people that have been here for a slightly longer time, a bit more established, before perhaps 2004 when Chelsea arrived?
Interesting question. I mean, if you look at one of the community things that Cobham organises is the village fair, which is in September, and I think you still get a lot of family people who are going to that, and you're still aware of a reasonable age spread, but it is very lacking in diversity. I mean, it's very noticeably lacking in diversity. I mean, you go from Cobham to anywhere near London, and there's a very striking difference. I mean, it is like a bubble. It really is a bit of a bubble in terms of social and racial diversity, and no doubt about it. So I think if you were coming into Cobham from a different environment, maybe a less privileged environment, I think you would notice that it was a bit Beverly Hills, as you say, as you describe it. Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely a Beverly Hills edge to it. But having said that, when you go to things like these community, like this Christmas fair, and the what was the one I called it, the street fair in September, you're still very aware that there are lots of families and younger people, but it is definitely racially very exclusive, I would say. So,
because you mentioned earlier that there was a strong village feel that perhaps isn't there as much anymore. There's still elements of it.
I think there's still elements of it, but I think the population is probably more aging. And I mean, you just have to look at on the high street. They've built this new development, which is all retirement homes. It's not starter homes. I would have been more in favour of having young families and starter homes being provided for, and so that's again very telling of Cobham, that it seems to be skewed more towards to older people, and older people, I find, particularly in this area, are very resistant to change and start. For example, I just think there should be a lot more happening for in the ways I've mentioned this several times now. Something I feel really strongly about is young people just can't afford to live here, and that the council is doing very little to help them get housing. So and that's obviously driving them away. So I think that is a real issue. And I do worry that it's the town is going to change. I feel it's we've got a remnant of that community feel still there, but it's in serious danger of disappearing. And I know a lot of people I know I've signed 1 or 2 petitions, not just Cobham, but around sort of Effingham area, where they've tried to build homes, starter homes for people, and the local community have been up in arms against it. And I've signed petitions to say, no, we should be doing this. But
why do you think they'd be up in arms about kind of creation of more?
Oh, because the people who have got the houses, the current houses, big houses with land, don't want to have building not in my backyard. Basically, they don't want to spoil the exclusivity, and of course, I suppose they're also thinking about the value of their house. They don't want to have a little housing estate next to them. So I feel there is a strong resistance from the established residents. Yeah.
One more question, if I may. So we mentioned kind of Chelsea. We mentioned the kind of retirement homes. Sort of external factors coming in, sort of perhaps disrupting the kind of the character of Cobham.
Yeah.
Are there any other developments, past, present, or even future, that you're aware of that have perhaps also had an impact on Cobham, whether it be positive or negative?
I suppose the biggest thing that happened was the building of the M25 service station. And I know I remember there was a huge resistance to that, and it went through years and years of discussion and people resisting and signing petitions. It eventually did get planning permission and has gone ahead. So there are obviously very strong arguments on both sides whether we should have it or whether we shouldn't. And I don't know, maybe that has brought more visitors to Cobham, because it's obviously a key hub on the motorway, and maybe that has brought some more people into the town. It's quite possible. So that was quite a big. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that recently. I mean. What else has happened? I mean, if you talk to Mr. Dunn, of course, I came here just after the A3 was built. I know just a few years before I came here, there was no A3, so there was a lot more traffic going through Cobham High Street, and 2 lanes of traffic. It was very, 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 very busy. So I suppose on the traffic front, it's probably changed. It's the big issue is parking. There is a real lack of parking, and it's expensive as well. So parking is a big issue. So I don't know whether they're going to, because that will have an impact on how many visitors the town centre can cope with. But I mean, on the whole, I feel at the moment it's a more buoyant high street than it used to be, but I think the shift has gone much more to the higher end in terms of shops and shoppers. There's definitely been a swing that way. But, so it's a case of weighing up the pros and the cons, and hopefully trying to keep a balance. And at the moment, I think we're at a bit of a tipping edge. I don't want to go too far down the other way, but I do feel we really need to be doing a lot more for starter homes and bringing younger families and people into the area.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for starting, Smith.
Okay, thank you very much.